You know, for most of us, a cage is the end of the line, right? But for some people, it's actually the starting pistol. They're the ones who look at those high walls, that razor wire, all the impossible odds, and they don't see a cage. Nope, they see a challenge. So what is a prison really? Let's actually think about that for a second, because I guarantee the answer is not as simple as it sounds. Yeah, we immediately think of steel bars, concrete walls, but is that it? Is that all a prison can be? What if the strongest bars aren't even physical? And that's exactly what we're going to dig into today. We're looking at 3 totally different kinds of cages and the mind-blowing stories of the people who broke out of them. We're going to see how a prison can be a golden fortress, a twisted state of mind, or, terrifyingly, even the house right next door. Okay, so our first story. It's a wild one. We're starting with a guy who didn't exactly break out of prison because, well, he built the thing himself. Let's talk about Pablo Escobar and his so-called golden cage. So back in the early 90s, the manhunt for Escobar is just heating up like crazy. So what does he do? He negotiates his own surrender. And the result was this place, La Catedral, the cathedral. I mean, calling it a prison is a stretch. It was a prison in name only. In reality, this thing was a fortress, custom built to keep his enemies out, not to keep him in.
And this is where it just gets completely absurd. You look at this comparison, right? On one side, you've got a normal maximum security prison. And on the other, you've got Escobar's version. We're talking jacuzzis, waterfalls. He even had a telescope so he could watch his daughter's soccer games from a distance. And get this, he kept running his entire multi-billion-dollar cocaine empire from inside, surrounded by his own hand-picked guards. It's unbelievable.
So what was the flaw here? What was the weak point in this ridiculous prison? Well, it wasn't a crumbling wall or a guard he had to bribe. The flaw was Escobar's own ego, his hubris. Because the moment the Colombian government finally said, okay, enough is enough, we're moving you to a real prison, what did he do? He just walked out the back door. His so-called escape was really just an act of defiance. He was saying, you don't control this deal anymore, I do. And that little walk out the back door, it kicked off an insane chain of events. His escape from La Catedral in '92 started a massive 16-month manhunt. I mean, he was literally the most wanted man on the planet. But here's the crazy part. Being free actually made him more vulnerable than he'd ever been inside his fortress. And it all came to a head on a rooftop in Medellín, where he was finally tracked down and killed by Colombian special forces. All right, let's shift gears completely. We're moving away from physical walls now and into something much, much darker. We're talking about psychological prisons. We're going into the terrifying world of a cult, where the cage wasn't made of steel. It was built inside the minds of its members. Up in a remote part of Canada, there was this commune run by a cult leader named Therio, and he ruled over his followers with an absolute iron fist. For one woman in particular, Gabrielle Lavallee, this place was a prison of pure terror. The total isolation, combined with Therio's brutal psychological control, it created a cage that was way more effective than any steel bars could ever be. And if you want to understand just how horrific it was, just look at this number, 8. That's how many of Gabrielle's teeth Therio pulled out, with pliers. It was his punishment after she tried to escape the first time. Just a sickening, brutal message designed to absolutely crush her spirit. But here's the thing. Here was the flaw in his prison. Therio made a huge miscalculation. He thought he could break her. And yeah, he could inflict unimaginable pain on her body, but he could not, for the life of him, extinguish her will to be free. Her spirit? It was still there. It was still fighting. And incredibly, after all that, she planned another escape. And this time, she made it. She got away, she found the police, and her testimony, her story of what she survived, it wasn't just her key to freedom. It was the key that unlocked the gates for everyone else. Her courage brought that entire cult crashing down. And the irony, the poetic justice here, it's just off the charts. Gabrielle found her freedom, but her captor, Therio, he ended up in a very real prison, where he was stabbed to death by another inmate back in 2011. The man who built a prison of the mind ended up dying inside one made of steel and stone. You can't make this stuff up. Okay, for our last story, we're bringing this whole idea of a prison terrifyingly close to home. We're not talking about some remote compound or drug lord's fortress anymore. No. This is about a prison that was hidden in plain sight on a totally ordinary residential street in Cleveland, Ohio. For more than 10 years, 3 women, Amanda Berry, Gina DeJesus, and Michelle Knight, were held captive in a house by a man named Ariel Castro. Think about that. For over a decade, life just went on as normal on their street. Neighbors mowed their lawns, kids rode their bikes, all while unspeakable things were happening right behind one of those doors. And their captor, Castro, he was meticulous. He was cruel. And for years, he never let his guard down. He never gave them a single opening. But then, on May 6th, 2013, after more than a decade of this, he made one tiny mistake. A single critical error. And that one mistake, it was all they needed. So here's what happened. Castro leaves the house, but he forgets to log an inner door, a second barrier. Amanda Berry sees it. She realizes this is her chance. It might be her only chance. She gets to the main door and just starts screaming for help. A neighbor, Charles Ramsey, hears her. He runs over, kicks in the bottom of that storm door, and Amanda Berry crawls out to freedom, holding the hand of her 6-year-old daughter who was born in that house. She gets into a neighbor's house, and she makes the 911 call that the entire world would soon be listening to. And her words, they're just chilling, but also so incredibly powerful. I'm Amanda Berry. I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years. And I'm here, I'm free now. I mean, just imagine hearing that. The sound of a decade of silence just shattering in a single moment. So there you have it. 3 escapes. 3 totally different kinds of prisons. A luxury fortress, a cult, and a suburban house. But it makes you wonder, what happens next? What happens after the door is finally kicked open or the chains are broken? What does freedom actually look like on the other side? Yeah, this really sums it up, doesn't it? For Pablo Escobar, the key to his freedom was his own arrogance. For Gabrielle Lavalle, it was her sheer, unbreakable will to live. And for Amanda Berry and the others, it all came down to one single fatal mistake made by their captor. Every cage had a different flaw, a different key. But here's the thing we have to remember, and we saw it clearly with Escobar. Just getting out doesn't automatically mean victory. His escape from La Catedral, it didn't lead to him sipping cocktails on a beach. No, it led to a 16-month chase that ended with him dead on a rooftop. In a way, escaping those walls just put him into a much bigger and ultimately a much deadlier prison, the whole world. And that really leaves us with this final crucial thought, right? For true survivors, people like Gabrielle Lavalle and Amanda Berry, the escape, that was just step 1. That was the start of a whole new long journey of reclaiming their lives. And for guys like Escobar, freedom was just a frantic, desperate race against the clock. So in every single one of these cases, breaking out was never, ever the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a brand new and often way more complicated chapter. So the real question isn't just how they got out, it's what on earth happened after.